DreAllDay.com.
You're now tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day, to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you've expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative, which is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into one bundle, one package, one mindset, one method, one philosophy, one book, one show, one daily masterclass, which is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is do not break the law, but do break the rules. And there's a difference between the two. Now, when I was out in the country of Georgia, which is all the way over by the Black Sea next to Azerbaijan and Armenia, just south of Russia, a lot of countries south of Russia, but in the summer of 2021, Anna and I visited a couple of Georgian churches, and from what I understood and understand, that the country of Georgia is very, very strongly, very strong into their religion. I don't even know exactly which religion it was, but there were a couple times when we went and visited these churches would have these rules as to, they had a dress code there. Like, they would have signs that said, don't take pictures inside the church. I definitely violated that several times. I took a bunch of pictures inside the churches, videos as well. And they would say for men, you can't be wearing shorts, and also you can't wear hats. So, I'm like completely, everything about me was in violation of going into this church. And they would have like little things you could put over yourself to cover yourself if you had these things. But they did say don't use the phones and don't be wearing a hat. And the last time that we went into one of these churches, we actually went to a church, but we didn't go inside. It was a really nice, it's a very picturesque type of church, even from the outside. You would just take a bunch of pictures from the outside of the church, and you would get great photography. You wouldn't even need to go inside. You could take pictures outside, just not inside. And I said, and Anna was like, well, I wasn't even planning on us going in. And I said, well, fuck it, let's go in. So we went inside the church, and of course there were some women who were working there, and they had on the church garb, but they weren't speaking English. And they were like, hey, no pictures, and hey, you gotta cover up your legs, because I had shorts on. And I just completely ignored them. I just acted like I didn't understand. Well, I didn't understand them, but I knew what they were trying to say, but I acted like I didn't. I went in there and took a whole bunch of photos. They called the security. I don't know if they were actual police officers or security guards or whatever they were, but they weren't speaking English either. So I just played dumb the entire time. And I got a thrill out of the whole situation. It was actually pretty funny to me. And I took all the pictures and I got that experience. Anna was a little bit traumatized in the situation, but I laughed about it afterwards. Now, I'm not telling you this story to tell you that you need to go do anything like this, especially in a foreign country, but that experience is what led to this topic. That's why I'm sharing it. So before I get into explaining into the context of this topic, the meat and potatoes of it, let me tell you that I have a text line where I want you to text me and tell me the best insight, or if you have a question or follow-up comment from anything that you hear today. My number is 305-384-6894. The number is down below in the show notes, so you can grab it from there. Or again, you can just send a text right now, or at the end of this episode, once you've heard everything and you get a chance to gather your own thoughts. So let's get into our points. The topic, once again, is do not break the law, but do break the rules. And what I was doing in that situation was breaking a rule. I wasn't breaking the law, because then they could have arrested me, right? But all they could do was say, hey, you gotta leave, or you gotta abide by the rules. And I said, well, fuck it, I'm not doing either one. I eventually left when the security people came, and it looked like it might start to become a bigger situation, but I knew where the line was, is the point that I'm making here. So let me get into my point so you'll understand it even better. Point number one, topic again, do not break the law, but do break the rules. Rules are arbitrary standards set by human beings in order to maintain control and order. Rules are, I guess, the same way people talk about race. Rules are a social construct, meaning they're not something that naturally occurred in the universe. It wasn't just naturally here when we arrived. Rules are things that were created by human beings in order to ostensibly help us get along socially. That's the purpose of a rule. The whole point is to maintain control and order. And control and order are not necessarily bad things, even though when you hear those words, you might get a negative connotation, but the control and order are pretty neutral. Control and order are actually good things in many cases. We want people to do things in order and have some type of control, and that at least everyone agrees to, so that we don't have complete chaos out here in the universe. It's often a good thing to have rules. For example, If you're playing a game of basketball and we all agree to the rules, that nobody can just pick up the ball and just go running with the ball in their hands. You have to dribble the ball in order to advance it or pass it. Having everyone operate by the same standards keeps things orderly. It's just like if you're on a plane, the rules are everybody needs to sit down in their seat and stay in your seat unless you're getting up to go to the bathroom. Maybe you might stand up and walk a little bit to stretch your legs if you really absolutely have to. But for the most part, everyone agrees to those rules and people follow them. And that's how we are able to maintain order. So yes, we do have police and we have authorities and security guards and things like that to enforce laws and sometimes rules. But for the most part, if you really think about it, the reason why society is able to operate the way that it does in a steady way and we have at least a little bit of predictability over how things are going to go is because we as humans, all of us in mass, we agree to follow what the rules are. Now, it's not like there's a cop on every single corner in the world that is punishing people for not following the rules. It's the fact that we have chosen. We agree to follow the rules as citizens, and that's what allows society to operate the way that it does. I'll give you another example. Next time you're outside, or if you're outside right now, go observe what happens at a stop sign or at a traffic light. It's not like there's a cop there arresting anybody who violates and runs through the red light or doesn't stop at the stop sign. But people still stop at the stop sign and allow the pedestrians to cross or allow the other cars opposing traffic to go. And people still stop at the red light and then they go on the green light. And we all have agreed to this process. We've agreed to this standard, and this is the way that we're going to operate, and this is why society can work, because people are agreeing to operate by certain standards and rules. So rules are a good thing, because if people just decided, or I'm just going to operate however I want to, and everybody thought like that, again, we would have complete chaos in society, and it wouldn't be good for any of us. So there's a mutual destruction that we're all guaranteed to get if we all decide to not follow the rules, and there's a mutual benefit that we all get if everybody does follow the rules. Now, one of the little caveat to that is if everybody's following the rules and a few people decide not to and to violate just for their own personal sake, they can get a little bit of gain in the short term, but in the long term, it doesn't work out even for those people. So rules are a good thing, making that clear. Everyone operate by the same standards keeps things orderly. However, sometimes adhering to the general standards, i.e. the rules, can be a limitation on you. Sometimes adhering to the rules smothers your creativity and it smothers your imagination. We just talked about how to re-engage your imagination in episode number 1872. Sometimes rules, even though they they have a positive purpose, their intention is positive, but sometimes what the rules end up doing, the results of the rule, is that it redistributes opportunity from one person to another person, maybe in a way that somebody may consider to be unfair, because fairness is very relative. Rules sometimes allow people who offer very little by way of substance to feel empowered. And I talked about this when we talked about getting over your COVID fear. For example, one time I talked about it in episode 1839, when I said, well, think of how many store workers in certain businesses and places. I remember going to the Miami Marlins baseball game, or just walking into convenience stores or any kind of business over the last year plus. And these employees, because of these rules that everybody had to have a mask on, now they had certain empowerments that they otherwise would not have. And when the mask rules go away, they don't have them anymore. So sometimes you get people who are not offering anything of substance that puts them in a position to where they can have authority. Now they feel like they have authority. Not to say there's anything wrong with being an employee at a store, but what I'm saying is you didn't have the authority to tell somebody how they had to dress themselves before, but now you get that authority because the rule comes in. And we saw, and you use the social media, maybe you saw, heard, read, maybe experienced yourself, some contentious interactions between store staff and employees when people just didn't agree on those rules when it came to face coverings and things like that. So in those cases, if you're that person who's looking at these situations, you're saying, well, these rules are limiting me. These rules are smothering my creativity. These rules are redistributing opportunity from me to other people. These rules are giving people authority over me who shouldn't have authority. In those cases, I believe it is okay for you to say, fuck the rules. I'm going to go against the rules and I'm going to do something different. Point number 2. Today's topic, once again, is don't break the law, but do break the rules. Breaking the rules, this is point number 2, is a fun form of personal development. Now, what do I mean by this? Let's be clear what personal development is. Personal development is material or experiences, ideas, thoughts, any of these things that help build you and make you a more valuable individual. That's what personal development is. So personal development can be an experience, it can be an association, it can be a person, it can be a book, it can be a podcast episode, it can be a video, it can be a thought, it can be an idea. All of those things are personal development. Now, personally, the person that you're listening to, your host, I am a limit pusher. I'm that type of person. I'm the type of person who will push limits with individuals. I will push limits with rules. I will push limits in places where I think something is kind of arbitrary and I'm going to see how far it can actually go. Doesn't mean I'm going to do it every time. There are times where I will definitely follow rules. There are times where I will even make and enforce rules, but I will push limits when I see an opportunity to do so. So I will purposely break rules sometimes just to see a few things, such as this situation I told you. I'm in a foreign land. I'm going into the church. I can clearly read the sign that says, don't use your phone, don't wear a hat, and cover up your legs. And I was pulling out my phone, wearing a hat, and had shorts on. I did it anyway, just to see a couple things. Number one, I want to know how the powers that be, i.e. the people who are allegedly going to enforce these rules, I just want to see how they respond to the fact that I'm not following the rule, if at all. Even during the pandemic, the height of the pandemic, I walked into businesses a few times without a mask on, walked around my building where I live in the elevators and everything without a mask on. I told you these stories. I just want to see how people are going to respond sometimes. Sometimes I just want to test and see what's going to happen if I don't follow the rule. So the rule's there, or what happens if you don't follow the rule? Is there really any repercussion for it? And the second reason why I will sometimes break rules on purpose is I want to see how I respond to the possible, how I'm going to respond to their response. So let's say I'm not following a rule, and then someone notices that I'm not following a rule, and they are the powers that be, so to speak, and they communicate with me that I'm not following that rule. So now there's an engagement going on. They're communicating with me that I'm not following it. I already know that I'm not following it. What's going to happen next? I want to know how I'm going to respond to that situation. Because those kind of situations, when there's a disagreement, even a small thing like, hey, you don't have your mask covering your mouth, but it's not covering your nose. Or, hey, you're not supposed to stand this close. You need to be 6 feet apart. Or any one of these little things. Or even when I was at the baseball game, the Marlins game, and the usher came by and said, well, you can't have your feet up on the seat in front of you, even though the seat in front of me was completely empty, as were the other 20 seats around us because they had us all spaced out. I'm going to challenge that, even though it'd be easy for me to put my feet down or pull my mask up or put a mask on, or socially distance from other people. It'd be easy for me to what's the word I'm looking for? To comply with the rules. Sometimes I'm not going to comply just to see what happens if I don't. And I want to find out how whoever is telling me about the rule, what they're going to do if I don't comply. Because often what you find is people who are enforcing rules don't really have any fortitude to enforce the rule. They're talking about the rule, but they don't really have any fortitude to do anything if you don't follow it. Just like when I was at the baseball game, the usher, he said he was the head of security. And the actual usher one of the ushers who had been cool with us and talking to us during the game, she didn't care that I had my feet up on the seat, but she said some other ushers do care about that and they'll come around and try to enforce it. And she was telling me while I was talking to this usher at the game, the head of security guy, she said, he's the head of security, he might get you kicked out of the baseball game. She was trying to warn me. And I said to her, well, kick me out of the baseball game for what? I'm not doing anything to get me kicked out of a baseball game, so I'm not going to listen to this guy. Now, obviously, he was an authority to her, but he wasn't an authority to me. So, again, we had different perspectives. But the point is, I want to find out what they're going to do. I want to know what the head of security actually had the power to do. And what it turned out, and I think I told the story recently, he didn't really have the power to do anything. He had to go get somebody else. He went and got an actual police officer who was working in the stadium, and she was actually very friendly compared to him. I guess again, this is my point. He was trying to enforce his will and feel like he had some power, but when challenged, it became very clear that he really didn't have any power whatsoever, which was my point. I want to see how I respond and how the other person responds. This is the second reason why I will break rules to these possible cortisol-inducing situations. Now, cortisol, if you don't know, that's the chemical that flows through your body whenever you're in a situation, maybe a fight or flight type of situation. So that may be an argument. It could be any type of confrontation, any type of confrontational situation. You get cortisol going through your body. It's the stress hormone where you're dealing with some type of stress. Somebody challenging you could lead to stress. It doesn't necessarily have to be stress. It depends on the person. Someone questioning you could lead to cortisol starting to course through your body. An argument with another person, a physical confrontation. All of these things can lead to stress. Or if you're on your way to the airport and you think you might be late, you might miss your flight if the Uber driver doesn't drive a little bit faster. These all could be cortisol-inducing situations, understanding that each of us is unique as a human being. So something that could induce stress in you may not induce stress in another person. Or something that induces stress in you the first time you go through it may not induce as much stress the second or third or the fourth time that you go through it. Something that I talk about in my book, The Third Day. If you don't have that book yet, go to thirddaybook.com and claim your free copy. Just cover the shipping for us. So this second reason why I may break rules just to see how I respond to it, it expands my comfort zone, because now I know how I can deal with the head of security at a sports arena, and I know how I'm going to respond to that situation because I've been in it now and I know exactly how it goes. So now it doesn't induce as much stress. It won't induce as much stress in me next time as it did the first time. It didn't really induce stress the last time either, because I really wasn't concerned with this person's power or whatever they claim they could be able to do, because within 2 minutes it was clear the things that they were threatening they couldn't even do. They didn't even have power to do anything, which was what I was trying to find out in the first place. So every time you go through a situation that could possibly induce stress in you, the next time it should hopefully induce less stress in you because you've been through that situation. But sometimes it goes in the opposite direction. It depends on how you look at the situation. Just because you go through a stressful situation does not mean it will be less stressful next time. It might be more stressful because now you have the baggage of remembering how it was last time, so you feel worse. I'll give you an example. So let's say you play in a sports game. Let's say you play basketball and you get fouled at the end of the game. Your team is down by 1 point and you get 2 free throws and you brick and miss both free throws. So now the team loses and everybody knows you missed the 2 free throws, so the whole world is talking about it. The next game that you play in and you get fouled in the same situation, your team is down by a point and you get 2 free throws, you might not feel more relaxed this time, because what you might think about is how you messed up last time and how you were the person to blame last time. You might feel that stress all over again and you might miss the 2 free throws again. Or you can go in the opposite direction. Okay, I've been through this situation. I know how bad it could be, but it didn't destroy me. So you come back even stronger and now you make both free throws and you want to be the one shooting the ball at the end of the game every time for the rest of your career because of the way you went through that situation. This is a choice. How are you going to respond to the stressful situation that you've been through? Even if that situation ends up in you being in a worse place, even if you end up quote unquote losing in a stressful situation, how you choose to respond to it determines how you're going to feel the next time you go through that situation. I'll give you another example anecdote that comes from 50 Cent, who I talked about in my Virtual Mentors episode. That was episode number, if I can find it, number 316, Virtual Mentors 50 Cent. And something 50 said, because everybody knows famously 50 Cent came from the streets. He was a drug dealer. He was into the street life, and he decided to get into music. While he was making his foray into music, he got shot over some street situation that had occurred in his past. Almost died, but he survived the gunshots, came back, put his album out, and became an American success story. And one of the things that 50 I've heard 50 talk about in his interviews is he says that when you get into a situation like what I got into when I got shot, there are 2 ways that you could go. You could either live the rest of your life in abject fear of something like that happening again, because that stress, you just keep getting reminded of that stress and you just feel it every time. So you're in fear of anything ever happening to you again. So you basically retreat into a shell for the rest of your life. Or you can go the opposite direction and you become basically fearless because you survived the worst thing that could possibly happen to you. So now you know nothing can bother you ever again. But again, it's a choice. You have a choice into which direction that you go. And people who are listening to this right now, maybe you or someone you know has been in some type of stressful situation. Doesn't have to be something as dramatic as getting shot, but it could be something like an argument, getting fired from a job, getting burned by a significant other, like a husband or wife, boyfriend or girlfriend, cheating on you or breaking your heart. And what do? Do you retreat into a shell and never put yourself in that situation again because of your fear of it happening again? Or do you say, okay, I've been through that, I've dealt with it, I know what it feels like. Now I'm not afraid of ever going through that situation again. I actually want to get in more of those because now I know better how to handle it. Is it going to expand your comfort zone or will it shrink your comfort zone? That is a question that you must answer, and it is a choice, again, of your mental toughness, confidence, and discipline, how you're going to deal with that situation. If you haven't read my book, The Third Day, yet, it hasn't, as of this recording, is not out yet. So go to thirddaybook.com, and on August 3rd, when we ship everybody's books out, then you'll be able to read it. So that situation could not bother you as much, or it could bother you 10 times more. So it's not saying, again, that you have to do these things like go break rules on purpose. If you're not wired like that, if you're not that type of person, don't go and do that, because it's just not going to be you. But if you ever do break a rule, and maybe you didn't even do it on purpose, but you find out that you did, you find out that you broke the rule, that is. This is a real benefit of breaking rules, that you may learn a couple things. Number one, that maybe the rule was paper thin and only as strong as people's compliance. In other words, the only reason that mask wearing rule was so strong is because everybody decided to comply. But if everybody just said, we're not wearing masks anymore, what's anybody going to do? You can't arrest everybody. You can't kick everybody out the store. You won't have any business. So rules are only as strong as, number one, people's compliance, and number two, your ability, whoever is setting the rule, that person's ability to enforce it. Because if you're not going to enforce a rule, then it's not really a rule. It's kind of like if your parents say, wash the dishes and clean your room, and you don't do it. It depends on how your parents respond to you not doing it, whether you look at it as a rule or not. Because if you don't wash the dishes and clean your room, and your parents don't do anything, then the next time they tell you to wash the dishes and clean your room, you can just ignore them because you know they're not going to do anything. But if you don't wash the dishes and clean your room, and your parents whoop your ass, now the next time you'll probably wash the dishes and clean your room because you know that there will be repercussions. So rules are only as strong as, number one, the compliance of the person being told the rule, and number two, the rule maker's willingness and ability to tender repercussions for those who do not follow the rule. So if everybody, as I said, if everybody stopped wearing masks, then the mask will be over tomorrow. It leads to point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is do not break the law, but do break the rules. New rules take shape only when people decide to stop conforming to the old rules. That's the only time new rules come in, is when people just say, you know what, we're not going to conform to the old rules anymore. We got to make some new rules. So an example is there was a woman who was her name was Sha'Carri Richardson. She is a sprinter on the United States Olympic team. She had earned her way onto the Olympic team, but then it came out shortly after the Olympic trials ended that she had tested positive for a chemical that is in marijuana. In other words, we're piecing it together. She had smoked weed. She came out and actually admitted that she had smoked some marijuana, which is a banned substance by the International Olympic Committee, which meant she would be banned for 30 days from competition, which would force her to miss the main track and field competition that she was aiming to win a gold medal in, which is a big deal because we know the Olympics is only every 4 years. Now, she came out and took responsibility, took accountability for the fact that she had smoked marijuana. She gave her reasons, but she had smoked marijuana. She admitted that. And she was like, well, look, I'm young. I'm only, I believe, 21, so I have more chances to make the Olympics and win the medal. But, I made the mistake, so I got to own it. But a lot of people spoke up in support of her and said, well, there shouldn't be a marijuana rule. Who cares? Marijuana is not illegal. Why is marijuana banned? Marijuana is legal in many states in America. Who cares? Why does the International Olympic Committee have a rule against marijuana? It shouldn't be a rule. I believe that since she knew what the rule was and she violated it anyway, then it's 100% fair game for her to face repercussions. But I also understand that these days, with the world that we're in now and the wokeness that we have now, that this is the way people like to do it. They say, well, that rule is, even though the rule is already in place, is a dumb rule, so we just change the rule so it can fit the narrative that we want right now. Specifically, one of the main reasons why people spoke up so much about this, because Sha'Carri Richardson is a black female. Had this been a white male with the same circumstances, I doubt many people would have even given a damn, would have been a footnote, and I probably wouldn't even known about it had it been a white male. So the fact that she was a black female definitely has something to do with it. And maybe, just maybe, they'll be able to create enough noise to stir the IOC to say, okay, we're going to change the rule, and now marijuana is allowed, and Sha'Carri Richardson can run in all her events. I wouldn't bet on that. Then by the time you hear this, maybe something has changed in that situation, but I wouldn't bet on it. But this is an example, a light example of how rules can sometimes get changed when enough people just say, we're not going to follow the old rules anymore. We want some new rules. We want to do things a little bit differently. Another example is in the summer of 2020, the summer of social justice, after the death of George Floyd went viral. A bunch of people made a whole bunch of noise about how the police are so terrible towards people of color in America. factually incorrect, but this is the belief that a lot of people had, and that belief mattered because, as they say, perception is reality. So what did a lot of cities do? They defunded their police unions. They defunded their police forces. So there were fewer police, much less policing being done, and that's what people wanted. They said, we want to defund the police. We want to get rid of police. And a lot of governments said, okay, people are really coming out strong against the old rule of having all these police. So you know what? We're going to make new rules and have fewer police. Now, we know now, later on, that was a bad idea because crime went up and a lot of places became a lot less safe when police got defunded. Every place where police got defunded, crime went up and things got worse. And quietly, what ended up happening, most of you probably didn't hear about it, but all those cities that defunded the police went back and refunded the police because they realized that was a bad idea. But the example still stands. People said, we're not going to follow the old rules of having cops, so now let's have fewer cops. And it worked. It got people to change. And again, sometimes that change can be for the better. Sometimes that change can be for the worse. But understand something. Rules do not change just because you bitch about them, argue against them, or grudgingly comply to them. Rules change when someone or many someones violate the rule and a new normal forms. And this is what happened. And it's not even necessarily violate, but go against or just strongly challenge that rule in a way that is direct towards the people who actually are in control of the rule, which is what happened with the whole defunding the police movement, if you want to call it that, and a new normal forms because of that. So to be clear, though, I want to make sure I'm adding this caveat. Sometimes when you break a rule, you might lose. All right, just because you broke a rule, maybe it does expand your comfort zone, but you might end up losing. Again, your parents say, wash the dishes, and you don't do it. Maybe your comfort zone expands because you never told your parents, no, I'm not going to follow your rule, but your parents whoop your ass and you get grounded for a month. So you might end up losing even though you won. All right, so it's kind of a Pyrrhic victory. So sometimes in life, you might break rules 10 different times and only get in trouble one time. And the other 9 times, nothing happens. But sometimes you could be so afraid of that one time, or that one time that you do get in trouble, quote unquote, that trouble could be so bad that maybe you don't try the other 9 anymore, simply because you know you don't want to deal with that, the possibility of that one. And on the other hand, going in the opposite direction, we're talking about rules, not laws, remember. Sometimes people are so afraid of the one time that their rule breaking doesn't work that they won't try the other 9 times. So basically they just keep themselves in their shell and never expand their comfort zone and they never take those 9 tries to expand their comfort zone because they're afraid of the one time that they might get caught, even though it hasn't actually happened yet. So in life, you could get fined, fired, reprimanded, turned away that one time, but if you don't try the other 9, then you can never expand your comfort zone to the point that even if you do get fined, fired, reprimanded, or turned away, you'll be able to deal with it because your comfort zone is so much bigger and you're such a more developed person that it doesn't even matter that somebody got mad at you. It doesn't even matter that somebody says something to you. The only way to make yourself eligible for creating new rules is through challenging the old rules. And if you don't have the temperament or the fortitude to be the one to challenge the old rules, then you are left subject to someone else finally deciding to challenge the old rules. And you have to wait until they come around to doing it. And maybe they won't even do it the way that you think they should do it. But if you're not willing to step up, then you have to be subject to someone else's decision. Most people are so afraid of challenging anything in life, they spend their entire lives conforming. And again, when you spend your entire life conforming, then you are subject to whatever the rules are because you're a conformist. You're going to conform to whatever the rules are. But if you want to change some of those rules, you have to have the willingness, the confidence, and the fortitude to step up and deal with the blowback or backlash that may come with challenging those rules. But you'll never know until you actually do it. All that said, let's recap today's class, which is do not break the law, but do break the rules. I was in some churches in a foreign country and they had clear rules posted outside with pictures and everything, and I violated them anyway, and I did it on purpose, knowing exactly what I was doing and why. I'm gonna tell you in these points here today. Number 1, rules are arbitrary standards set by people to maintain control and order. Control and order are not necessarily bad things. Traffic lights, stop signs, there's a good reason why those things work, and it's not because there are cops on every corner. It's because society decides that we are going to follow these rules, and that's why we can have some normalcy in society. It's like you're playing basketball. Everybody agrees generally to what the overall rules are, so nobody can just pick up the ball and start sprinting with it. That's ridiculous. It goes against the rules. You have to dribble the basketball or pass the basketball. But sometimes adhering to rules limits you, smothers you, redistributes opportunity from you, or allows people who have little substance to feel empowered over you. In those cases, you might want to break the rules. Point number 2, breaking rules is a fun form of personal development if you have the makeup for doing it. Personally, I'm a limit pusher. I break rules so I can find out how people respond to their rules being broken and to see how I respond to a possible cortisol-inducing situation, stress-inducing situation that expands my comfort zone. But that is not something that automatically happens as a choice. Someone getting into a stress-inducing situation might make you so fearful of that stress that you never do it again, or it might make you so used to the stress that it doesn't even bother you if you go through that situation again. So you have to choose, how are you going to respond to that situation that induced stress in you? Point number 3, new rules take shape only when people decide to stop conforming to the old rules, not because you bitched about them, argued, or complied. Rules change only when someone or many someones violate the rule and a new normal is formed. But to be clear, sometimes breaking a rule could lead you to losing. And many people are so afraid of the one time that they might lose that they never even get to see the 9 times that breaking a rule actually worked for them. Therefore, they don't get the expansion of their comfort zone that would make them able to absorb the one time that it didn't work. You understand? So you got to be willing to break rules 10 times, and the one time that you do get reprimanded for it, you have expanded your comfort zone so much through the other 9 that the one reprimanding, I think that's the best way to say it, doesn't affect you that much, because you have expanded yourself so much that you can deal with it. But you can't get through the 1 without going through the 9, which means you got to be willing to try. But many people are so afraid of challenging anything, they spend their entire lives conforming. But hey, that's their choice. Send me a text. Tell me the best thing you got from today's class. My number is 305-384-6894. Work on your game. Dre all day.